Take out your literature packet and turn to the vocab section, please. No, we're not going to be cursive right now. We'll do it at the end if we have time. Okay, we should be on chapter 7. Chapter 7 vocab. I'm pulling it up. Jacob. Jacob. Come on. Yeah, been so long. Okay. First word should be savory. Savory, pleasing to the taste. It's coming, I know. And go get it. There we go. Savory, pleasing to the taste. Every once in a while, actually quite often a while, I enjoy a nice savory steak. Oh, savory. Yes.
Gary will say better.
Excuse me. Quiet.
Gary will say
Next one. First one is savory. Next one, valiant. A valiant soldier has courage and boldness. They are brave. Typically, we use this word when talking about soldiers or a knight or battle or army, things like that. Hopefully, unless it's not a good description of them, it would not be valiant. Okay. Valiant. Next one is victuals. Victuals. If you're going to go on a long journey, you probably don't want to pack a bag full of victuals. Oh, valiant. And last one for today, a bivouac. Okay? Kind of a funny word that we don't use a whole lot, but a bivouac is a temporary camp in an unsheltered area. This may be the scariest bivouac I've ever seen in my life. But if you're on a journey and you need to kind of set up camp for the night, you're not going to stay again in that same place, but you need a place to stay that night, you'll probably set up a bivouac. Okay? Yeah. In the story? Yeah. Just wait and see how they use the word. Well, that's probably not what it described in the word. Just wait and see. They don't, I'm sure they don't use the word in the story to describe what you're doing. Brooklyn? A bivouac? No, that's more permanent. A bivouac is like, I'm going to throw up my tent for the night. It's like, it's temporary and you're going to move it. Diksha? Yeah, no.
I tend to roll.
Luke? Really? Oh, that's cool. That one looks kind of fun. Okay, Connor and then Aiden, then we're done. Connor?
I've seen pictures of the Billboard on Everest. They like secure it and there's like a side door.
Really? Yeah.
But the thing is, there's like 100-mile-an-hour winds. They could do.
Yeah, exactly. Aiden, I was going to call you, but you're already talking and making it. Can you get it together? Okay. What is it?
So, is it panic over
Yeah, you could consider a hammock a bivouac.
because a couple years ago,
Mm-hmm.
I went to summer camp, and the only fun part that I liked was the hammock.
Oh, really?
You got to roll up inside the mountain and it's really enough.
Yeah, I believe that. All right, go ahead and open in your Prince Caspian book to chapter 7. We're going to be on page 87. Okay? 87. All right. Okay, so let's do a little review. From our reading on Friday, Caspian goes to meet basically the rest of Old Narnia. What do I mean by Old Narnia? Cameron? Okay. And what about these magical creatures? Why hasn't he met them before? Very good. From the Telmarine. Okay. What was the name of the leader of the centaurs, whose job is to watch the skies, and he recommends to Caspian to go to war? Remember his name? Look back in the book if you can't remember. The name of the leader of the centaurs. Manuel? Glenstorm. Very good. Remember, Caspian was like, oh, we'll just gather up and make our own little nation here in the woods. We don't have to fight anybody. He says, no. We're going to have to fight your uncle, King Miraz, to take Narnia back. Take back control of Narnia. Okay? What was the name of the valiant, brave little mouse that he runs into? Who was bigger than a normal mouse and quite more formal. Luke? Reepicheep. Very good. What was the name of the animal that spread his message far and wide very quickly? The squirrel. Oh, look back if you can't remember. Layla? Pattertwig. Very good. And then what was the last creature that Narnia met, that Prince Caspian met at the dancing lawn? Jacob?
I think the fawn.
The fawn. Very good. So they gather up they all meet up at the dancing lawn for a feast so that Caspian can be introduced to the rest of old Narnia, and they pretty much declare him their leader. Okay, he is now going to be the one to gather up old Narnia into a group so that they can plan an attack on King Miraz and get the Telmarines out of Narnia. Okay? Yes.
We didn't go and meet all the old Narnia. We didn't meet the witches.
True. But the ones that are still there, he met.
The good ones.
So far.
The
what?
The witches were there too.
Not at the dancing lawn, they're not.
I know, but we didn't go meet everyone.
Right, he didn't meet every single creature from the Narnia of old, yes. But all the ones that he needs to have on his side, he has met. What's the other thing I was going to mention? As a reminder, remember, this is still a flashback, okay? This is still the dwarf explaining things to the Pevensey children, getting them caught up on what's been going on in Narnia all these years, okay? You're just in time. We're on chapter 7. You're just in time. We're on chapter 7. Huh? Right. We did our vocab, but we haven't started reading it. That's what I was saying. Okay, Connor. Last one that we're going to start.
I said nervous, so I know the
All right, chapter 7. We're on page 87. Old Narnia in danger. Yes. Just help me remember, okay? You and Caleb. Brooklyn. We're going to try. Ooh, fun stuff.
Yeah, it is long.
Woo! All right, let's go. Here we go. Old Narnia in danger. The place where they had met the fawns was, of course, Dancing Lawn itself, and here Caspian and his friends remained till the night of the great council. To sleep under the stars, to drink nothing but well water, and to live chiefly on nuts and wild fruit, was a strange experience for Caspian after his bed with silken sheets in a tapestried chamber at the castle, with meals laid out on gold and silver dishes in the anteroom, and attendants ready at his call. But he had never enjoyed himself more. Did Caspian enjoy not having all the fine luxuries of the castle, or was he kind of sad? Really? But he had never enjoyed himself more. No, meaning he had never been happier.
I know.
That means he did enjoy it. He was enjoying being in the woods with no luxuries.
Oh.
He had never enjoyed himself more, so he was never, even though he's used to all these luxuries, he was really enjoying the woods life much better. Correct. Never had sleep been more refreshing, nor food tasted more savory. And he began already to harden, and his face wore a kinglier look. Basically, when you looked at him, you could tell he looked more like a king, like he was in charge. When the great night came, and his various strange subjects came stealing into the lawn by ones and twos and threes, or by sixes and sevens, the moon then shining almost at her full, his heart swelled as he saw their numbers and heard their greetings. What does that mean when it says that his heart swelled? How is he feeling? His heart swelled as the more people he saw come to support him. Layla? Mm-hmm. His heart swelled with pride and with thankfulness. You know how sometimes when it's like if someone throws a surprise birthday party for you and all these people show up and you realize how many people love you, your heart swells. You're like, oh, that makes me so happy. Okay? So he's seeing how many people are supporting him. Yes? Your water bottle? Hurry. All whom he had met were there. The bulgy bears and red dwarfs and black dwarfs, the moles and badgers, hares and hedgehogs, and others whom he had not yet seen. 5 satyrs as red as foxes, the whole contingent of talking mice, armed to the teeth and following a shrill trumpet, and some owls, the old raven of Ravenscar. Last of all, and this took Caspian's breath away, with the centaurs came a small but genuine giant, Wimbleweather of Deadman's Hill, carrying on his back a basket full of rather seasick dwarfs, who had accepted his offer of a lift and were now wishing they had walked instead. Why were they wishing they had walked, Brooklyn? Good. So the dwarves were feeling kind of seasick. They're like, oh, okay, we should have walked. The bulgy bears were very anxious to have the feast first and leave the council till afterward, perhaps even till, tomorrow. Reepicheep and his mice said that councils and feasts could both wait, and proposed storming Miraz in his own castle that very night. Pattertwig and the other squirrels said they could talk and eat at the same time, so why not have the council and the feast all at once? The moles proposed throwing up entrenchments around the lawn before they did anything else. The fawns thought it would be better to begin with a solemn dance. The old raven, while agreeing with the bears that it would take too long to have a full council before supper, begged to be allowed to give a brief address to the whole company. But Caspian and the centaurs and the dwarves overruled all these suggestions and instead insisted on holding a real council of war at once. Poor bulgy bears, they're going to be hungry. When all the other creatures had been persuaded to sit down quietly in a great circle, and when, with more difficulty, They had got Pattertwig to stop running to and fro and saying, "Silence! Silence everyone for the king's speech! Silence! Silence everyone for the king's speech!" Blah, blah, blah. He's just a chatterbox. Caspian, feeling a little nervous, got up. "Nonians," he began. But he never got any further, for at that very moment, Camilo the hare said, "Hush! There's a man somewhere near." They were all creatures of the wild, accustomed to being hunted, and they all became still as statues. The beasts all turned their noses in the direction which Camilo had indicated. "Smells like man, and yet not quite like a man," whispered Truffle Hunter. "It's getting steadily nearer," said Camilo. "2 badgers and you 3 dwarfs, with your bows at the ready, go softly off to meet it," said Caspian. Now, why are they all a little on edge at the thought of a man coming nearby? Sadiksha? Very good. Typically, when these wild animals, they are wild, even though these are the talking kind, they're the magical Narnian kind, they're still animals. So when they smell a human coming, they assume it means they're going to be hunted. Okay? So they're all going into defense mode, like, whoa, someone's coming, or we might be attacked. What do we got to do? Okay? "Ugh, we'll settle him," said a black dwarf grimly, fitting a shaft to his bowstring. "Don't shoot if it is alone," said Caspian. "Catch it." "Why?" asked the dwarf. "Do as you're told," said Glenstorm the centaur. Everyone waited in silence while the 3 dwarfs and 2 badgers trotted stealthily across to the trees on the northwest side of the lawn. Then came a sharp dwarfish cry. "Stop! Who goes there?" And a sudden spring. A moment later, a voice, which Caspian knew well, could be heard saying, all right, I'm unarmed. Take my wrist if you like, worthy badgers, but don't bite right through them. I want to speak to the king." "Dr. Cornelius!" cried Caspian with joy, and rushed forward to greet his old tutor. Everyone else crowded around. "Ha!" said Nickabrick. "A renegade dwarf! A half-and-halfer! Shall I pass my sword through his throat?" Why does he hate Dr. Cornelius so much? Luke? Because he's a half-dwarf, half-human, and that's who Nickabrick hates the most. Because he considers them to be traitors. Yes. "Be quiet, Nickabrick," said Trumpkin. "The creature can't help its ancestry." "This is my greatest friend, and the savior of my life," said Caspian. "And anyone who doesn't like his company may leave my army, at once." "Dearest doctor, I am glad to see you again. However did you find us out?" "By a little use of simple magic, your majesty," said the doctor, who was still puffing and blowing from having walked so fast. So maybe more like, "By a little use of simple magic, your majesty. But there's no time to go into that now. We must all fly from this place at once. You are already betrayed, and Miraz is on the move. Before midday tomorrow, you will be surrounded." "Betrayed!" said Caspian. "And by whom?" "Another renegade dwarf, no doubt," said Nickabrick. "No, by your horse, Destria," said Dr. Cornelius. "The poor brute knew no better. When you were knocked off, of course, he went dawdling back to his stable in the castle. Then the secret of your flight was known." How'd they find out about that he had run away? Ian?
His horse was,
And when the horse comes back with no rider, that's bad, right? If a horse comes back with no rider, that means the rider is somewhere in the woods. And when it's Caspian's horse that comes back with no rider, that makes him know that Caspian's out in the woods somewhere. Okay? "I made myself scarce, having no wish to be questioned about it in Miraz's torture chamber.
I had a pretty good guess from my crystal as to where I should find you. But all day, that was the day before yesterday, I saw Miraz's tracking parties out in the woods. Yesterday that I learned that his army is out. I don't think some of your pure-blooded dwarves have as much woodcraft as might be expected. You left tracks all over the place. Great carelessness. At any rate, something has warned Miraz that old Narnia is not so dead as he had hoped, and he is on the move. "Hurrah!" said a very shrill and small voice from somewhere at the doctor's feet. "Let him come! All I ask is that the king will put me and my people in the front." "What on earth," said Dr. Cornelius, "has your majesty got grasshoppers or mosquitoes in your army?" Then, after stooping down and peering carefully through his spectacles, he broke into a laugh. "By the lion," he swore, "it's a mouse! Señor Mouse, I desire your better acquaintance," meaning I want to know you a little bit more. "I am honored by meeting so valiant a beast." "My friendship you shall have, learned man," piped Reepicheep. "And any dwarf or giant in the army who does not give you good language shall have my sword to reckon with." "Is there even time for this foolery?" asked Nickabrick. "What are our plans? Battle or fight?" "Oh, no, battle or flight?"
Oh.
"Battle if need be," said Trumpkin. "But we are hardly ready for it yet, and this is no very defensible place." "I don't like the idea of running away," said Caspian. Hear him," said the Bulgy Bears. "Whatever we do, let's not have any running, especially not before supper, and not too soon after it neither." "Those who run first do not always run last," said the Centaur. "And why should we let the enemy choose our position instead of choosing it ourselves? Let us find a strong place." "That's wise, your majesty, that's wise," said Trufflehunter. "But where are we to go?" asked several voices. "Your majesty," said Dr. Cornelius, "and all you variety of creatures, I think we must fly east and down the river to the great woods. The Telmarines hate that region. They have always been afraid of the sea, and of something that may come over the sea." What is he talking about? Matthew?
He was talking of the
Mm-hmm.
lion.
That is why they have let the great woods grow up. If traditions speak true, the ancient Cair Paravel was at the river mouth. All that part is friendly to us, and hateful to our enemies. We must go to Aslan's Howe. Okay, Aslan's Howe is the location where Aslan was killed in the first book. Okay, so if you haven't read, raise your hand if you have not read the first book. Okay,
Oh, wait,
stop that.
sorry.
Right. Okay, so remember in the movie the part where Aslan is killed before he comes back to life,
Oh, yeah.
signifying Jesus Christ dying and coming back to life? The place where he was killed, the stone table, that is Aslan's house. Okay, so Dr. Cornelius is saying, you know what? We better go to Aslan's Howe / Cair Paravel area because the Telmarines won't go in that region. They're too afraid of the woods. So let's go there and we can build our army there. Manny? Mm-hmm. Correct. Sorry. I mean the first book in succession to this story. Good point, though. Was that your point, Brian? Okay. Question?
No, comment.
Make it fast.
He first spoke to this, it also said if anyone dies willingly on the stone table, then they'll come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think I'll just go willingly down here and just get around the back.
Mm.
And then there's no... Yeah, because then they can go back and surround them.
It's an interesting theory. I don't think it would work.
No,
But maybe. Aslan's Howe, said several voices. We don't even know what it is. It lies within the skirts of the great woods, and it is a huge mound which Narnians raised in very ancient times over a very magical place, where there stood, and perhaps even still stands, a very magical stone. The mound is all hollowed out within into galleries and caves, and the stone is in the central cave of all. There is room in the mound for all our souls, and those of us who have most need of cover and are most accustomed to underground life can be lodged in the caves. The rest of us can lie in the wood. At a pinch, all of us, well, except this worthy giant, could retreat into the mound itself, and there we should be beyond the reach of every danger except famine. Okay, so he says we should build our camp there because what they did is long time ago, over the stone table that the Narnians built this mound, like a hill. Okay, so now the stone table, Aslan's How, is actually underground, which serves as very good defense against the enemy. Okay, so he's saying anyone who's used to living underground, animals, moles, maybe even some of the mice, they can actually live in Aslan's How. The rest of us who need to live in the land, we can live in the woods nearby. And if we get into a pinch and someone comes to attack us, we can all scurry into the mound and hide in there for protection. Okay? It's a pretty good plan. Well, it is a good thing we have a learned man among us, said Truffle Hunter. But Trumpkin muttered under his breath, soup and celery. I wish our leaders would think less about these old wives' tales and more about victuals and arms. What is victuals again? Jacob? It is, Brooklyn. Food supplies. But all approved of Cornelius's proposal, and that very night, only half an hour later, they were on the march. Before sunrise, they arrived at Aslan's How. It was certainly an awesome place, a round green hill on top of another hill, long since overgrown with trees, and one little low doorway leading into it. The tunnels inside were a perfect maze till you got to know them, and they were lined and roofed with smooth stones. And on the stones, peering into the twilight, Caspian saw strange characters and snaky patterns, and pictures in which the form of a lion was repeated again and again. It all seemed to belong to an even older Narnia than the Narnia of which his nurse had told him. Luke? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bears don't love doing anything that takes any kind of hard work. It was after they had taken up their quarters in and around the How that fortune began to turn against them. King Miraz's scouts soon found their new lair, and he and his army arrived on the edge of the woods. And as so often happens, the enemy turned out stronger than they had reckoned. Caspian's heart sank as he saw company after company arriving. And though Miraz's men may have been afraid of going into the wood, they were even more afraid of Miraz. And with him in command, they carried battle deeply into it, and sometimes almost to the How itself. Caspian and the other captains, of course, made many sorties into the open country. Thus there was fighting on most days, and sometimes by night as well. But Caspian's party had, on the whole, the worst of it. Whose army was bigger, Miraz's or Caspian's? Riley? Miraz, by a lot. And they had found them at Aslan's How. Okay, so things were not looking good for the army. No, it just says that his scouts, his spies found them. At last there came a night when everything had gone as badly as possible, and the rain, which had been falling heavily all day, had ceased at nightfall, only to give place to raw cold. That morning, Caspian had arranged what was his biggest battle yet, page 97. And all had hung their hopes on it. He, with most of the dwarfs, was to have fallen on the king's right wing at daybreak. And then, when they were heavily engaged, giant Wimbleweather, with the centaurs and some of the fiercest beasts, was to have broken out from another place and endeavored to cut the king's right off from the rest of the army. This was their plan to help to defeat the king. But it had all failed. No one had warned Caspian, because no one in these later days of Narnia even remembered that giants are not at all clever. Look, this is our theme of memory versus remembrance versus forgetting, right? Because no one remembered that the giants are not clever at all, the giant Wimbleweather ruined their battle plan. Poor Wimbleweather, though as brave as a lion, was a true giant in that respect. He had broken out at the wrong time and from the wrong place, and both his party and Caspian's had suffered badly and done the enemy little harm. The best of the bears had been hurt, a centaur was terribly wounded, and there were few in Caspian's party who had not lost blood. It was a gloomy company that huddled under the dripping trees to eat their scanty supper. Okay, so how do you think the giant feels after losing that battle for them? Probably about like this, right? He's pouting, all right? Which he has a right to because he messed up the whole plan. Yes. So the only thing that's happened so far is they have gathered up they've decided to camp out at, Dr. Cornelius found them. So he escaped from the castle. He is now with Caspian and the old Narnians kind of on their side. They've escaped to Aslan's Howe. That's where they're going to camp out, which is, Aslan's Howe is a stone table from the first book, and they built like a mound over it, and so it's now underground. They're kind of hidden under there. But Miraz's army has found them, and they're now in battle with Miraz, and it's not going well. Okay? Yes.
One that's interesting
Sure.
is how the same time that Dr. Cornelius came, that Miraz has found them, and has also, and the battle plan has also been.
So you think Cornelius maybe led them to him?
Yeah, because.
But he also said that they left a lot of tracks.
Yeah, but it's still kind of.
A little suspicious? Maybe.
Probably glad they were food.
The gloomiest of all was Giant Wimbleweather. He knew it was all his fault. He sat in silence, shedding big tears which collected on the end of his nose, and then fell off with a huge splash on the whole bivouac, or temporary tent, of the mice, who had just been beginning to get warm and drowsy. They all jumped up, shaking the water out of their ears and wringing their little blankets, and asked the giant in shrill but forcible voices whether he thought they weren't wet enough without this sort of thing. So they weren't very happy with the giant for getting them even more wet with his tears. And then other people woke up and told the mice they had been enrolled as scouts and not as concert party, and asked why they couldn't keep quiet. And Wimbleweather tiptoed away to find some place where he could be miserable in peace. And then he stepped on somebody's tail, and somebody, they said afterward it was a fox, bit him. And so everyone was out of temper. What's the general attitude of the Narnian army tonight? Jacob?
Gloomy or angry at the giant?
Yeah, everyone's grumpy, right? The giant's crying because he messed everything up. As the tears fell on the mice, they get mad because they don't like being wet and cold. Then they get mad at the giant. He starts to walk away. He walks away. He steps on somebody's tail. They bite him. So now he's even more sad. Everyone's angry. They're yelling at the mice to be quiet. It's just a bad night in Narnia for the Narnian army. But in the secret and magical chamber at the heart of the Howe, King Caspian, with Cornelius and the Badger and Nickabrick and Trumpkin, were at council. Thick pillars of ancient workmanship supported the roof. In the center was the stone itself. A stone table split right down the center and covered with what had once been writing of some kind. But ages of wind and rain and snow had almost worn them away in old times, when the stone table had stood on the hilltop, and the mound had not yet been built above it. Kayla, are you on the right page, buddy? Okay, take your head out. They were not using the table nor sitting around it. It was too magic a thing for just common use. They sat on logs a little way away from it, and between them was a rough wooden table, on which stood a rude clay lamp lighting up their pale faces and throwing big shadows on the walls. You know, if your majesty is ever to use the horn, said Truffle Hunter, I think the time has now come. Caspian had of course told them of his treasure several days ago. What is this horn supposed to do again? Cameron? Very good. Whenever you blow it, it's supposed to bring help, but nobody really knows how or when or what's gonna come. When was Caspian told to blow it? Brian?
Grade speed, when he looks killed.
That's right. It is hour of greatest need. Ian, put the book on the desk, please, and face this way.
Why would he blow it when he's about to get killed because it takes 2 minutes for them to come, and then it takes him a little bit more time to get to his army, and by that he's dead.
Well, he doesn't know. It might be instant. He was just told, don't blow it until you're your greatest need. Maybe.
Yes.
We are certainly in great need, answered Caspian. But it is hard to be sure we are at our greatest. Supposing there came an even worse need and we'd already used it. He said, listen, if I'm supposed to use it when we're at our worst point, what if I use it now and a worse point comes later? It's kind of hard to tell. By that argument, said Nickabrick, your majesty will never use it until it's too late. I agree with that, said Dr. Cornelius. And what do you think, Trumpkin? Asked Caspian. Oh, as for me, said the Red Dwarf, who had been listening with complete indifference, your majesty knows I think the horn and that bit of broken stone over there and your great King Peter and your lion Aslan are all eggs and moonshine. What does he mean by that? He's like, you guys know that I think that table, lion, King Peter, those are all eggs and moonshine. What does he mean by that? Layla? Yeah. He's like, I think it's all kind of hogwash. I don't believe in that stuff. It's all one to me when your majesty blows the horn. All I insist on is that the army is told nothing about it. There's no good raising the hopes of magical help, which, as I think, are sure to be disappointments. Well, then in the name of Aslan, we will wind Queen Susan's horn, said Caspian. He's like, okay, well then I guess we're going to use it. When he comes back, you can go. There is one thing, sire, said Dr. Cornelius, that should perhaps be done first. We do not know what form the help will take. It might call Aslan himself from over the sea, but I think it's more likely to call Peter the High King and his mighty consorts down from the high pass. But in either case, I do not think we can be sure that the help will come to this very spot. Never said a truer word, put in Trumpkin. I think, went on the learned man, that they, or he, will come back to one or other of the ancient places of Narnia. This, where we now sit, is the most ancient and most deeply magical of all, and here I think the answer is likeliest to come. But there are 2 other places. One is Lantern Waste, upriver, west of Beaver's Dam, where the royal children first appeared in Narnia, as the records tell. Remember in the first book when they first enter Narnia at the lamppost? That's what he's talking about. The other place is down at the river mouth, where the castle of Cair Paravel once stood. And if Aslan himself comes, that would be the best place for meeting him too, for every story says that he is the son of the great emperor of the sea, over the sea, and over the sea he will pass. I should like very much to send messengers to both places, to Lantern Waste and the river mouth, to receive them, or him, or it.
Whatever.
Why does the doctor want to send messengers to those 2 places, the lantern and the castle? Connor?
So if they appear there, then they can tell, come quick, we need your help.
They can tell him where to go. Very good.
It's my favorite person ever.
Just as I thought, muttered Trumpkin. The first result of all this foolery is not to bring us help, but to lose us 2 fighters.